Good morning, everybody. Happy Monday. Thanks for being here with us. My name is Katie Earle, and I'm the coordinator of the University Express program, and I work for the Erie County Department of Senior Services. And we're joined here today with Jen Kuhrt from BlueCross BlueShield of Western New York. Welcome, Jen.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
We're glad to have you. And before we get to her presentation, we'll just quickly go through my normal housekeeping. So if you know what I'm going to say, you can tune me out. But if you're new, you might want to learn here. So you've joined muted and without your video showing, and it's not because you've done anything wrong. That's just the settings of our program here today. And as Jen goes through her program, if you have any questions or comments, feel free to type those in the Q&A panel, and we'll try to get to as many as we can at the end of her presentation. So if you're on a laptop, your Q&A panel is likely located at the lower right-hand side of your screen. Just click on that, expand it, send your questions right to me. And then if you're on a tablet or smartphone, you touch your screen, that brings up your control panel. You'll see a circle that has 3 dots. Click on that, and then you'll see your Q&A. So we hope you get all your questions answered while we're here together. So we'd like to thank the sponsors of our program, which is my Department of Senior Services, BlueCross BlueShield of Western New York, Celsius Orthopedics, and Wegmans for everything they do for us. And if you or a loved one need anything at all, we're at 858-8526 here at Senior Services. All right, let's learn about the star of our show. Jen Kuhrt works for BlueCross BlueShield of Western New York as Manager of Population Health. Her educational background is in physical therapy and nutrition, and she has certificates in plant-based nutrition and mind-body eating. She's a health enthusiast and is passionate about sharing information and resources on plant-based nutrition and health behavior change like she will today. Thanks for being here, Jen. The floor is yours.
Thanks so much, Katie. And thank you all for being here this morning. Plant-based nutrition is by far one of my favorite topics. And the reason for that is, as far as health is concerned, I truly believe this can be life-changing, if not life-saving information. So, gotta move you a little bit here, Katie. So they say when you give a talk, you should first explain why your subject matters. So I want to start with this quote from T. Colin Campbell, who, for some of you who have already learned a little bit about plant-based nutrition, you've heard his name already, because he is considered to be the grandfather of plant-based nutrition. He conducted the China study, which was a huge epidemiological study done back in the 70s, I think late 70s, early 80s. That was a huge study on the effects of nutrition on human health. And he's also featured in a popular documentary, plant-based documentary called Forks Over Knives. So he's done a ton of research in this field. He's really kind of led the charge. He spent a lot of his career at Cornell University as a professor of nutritional biochemistry. So for those of you who can see the slide and those on the phone, I will read it for you. T. Colin Campbell says, the nutrition of whole plant-based foods does more overall to treat disease and restore health than all the pills and procedures combined. So you know that if you go to the doctor, which all of us should be doing regularly, a lot of times in our country and other industrialized countries, if we have an ailment or a condition, we get prescribed medications or we get recommended to have procedures that really, between the drugs and the procedures, they might address our symptoms, but they don't necessarily get at the root cause of what is causing our ailments. So through Colin Campbell's research, and there are many, many other well-respected doctors who are doing research in this field, he's really saying that if we were all to eat this way or eat more this way, that we could do away with many of those drugs that are costly and those procedures that are also costly and that there have certain risks involved. So, sorry, I'm just trying to advance my slide here. Here we go. So there are thousands of studies supporting a whole food plant-based diet and its positive effects on many, many, many conditions and diagnoses. So this slide is a little bit wordy. I know some of you on the phone obviously can't see it. I won't read the entire thing to you, but you know, I think that some of us are familiar with plant-based nutrition and the fact that it can help with conditions like diabetes and heart disease, and I will certainly talk about those things. But you may not be aware of how far-reaching this way of eating can be as far as what it can address for human health in different types of conditions. So I'm just going to name off of a couple of them that are named in this slide. So certainly coronary artery disease and diabetes, but also things like irritable bowel syndrome, GI cancers, kidney impairments, Crohn's disease, impotence and infertility, acne, arthritis. So there are many, many conditions that this way of eating can help to improve, address, even reverse at times. So it's not a fad diet. It's really a lifestyle. And you might be asking yourself, well, how does this work? How could it possibly be that just, you know, eating more fruits and vegetables and whole grains, how could it possibly address all of these different things? And so there are a couple ways that I want to just bring to your attention. So underlying all of these types of conditions are some similar processes that go on in our body. So one is the inflammatory process, another is decreased blood supply, and a third is poor cellular health. So poor cellular health, limited blood supply, and inflammation can be underlying causes to all of these types of conditions that I just named off and that are printed here in this slide. So it really is far-reaching. I want to make sure people understand that it's not a fad diet, even though we do see plant-based marketed more in our food products and that there truly is research and research studies that are backing up these positive effects. Now, I don't mean to say that it's the absolute cure-all for everything, and I definitely don't mean to say that people should start, you know, doing away with their medications or ignoring when their doctor advises to have a procedure. There's definitely a place for those things, and you should follow the advice of your doctor. But if you are looking to get at the root cause of any sort of conditions that you've been diagnosed with or ailments that you might have, this could be a very effective way that you can implement yourself that could help you with your health. So hopefully that conveys why I feel like this topic is so important. And I just want to give an overview of what I'm going to talk about today and the order in which I'm going to go about it. So first, we'll talk about the impact of nutrition in general, and then I'm going to move on to what actually is a whole food plant-based diet or whole food plant-based nutrition. So within that, I'll talk about the standard American diet. We'll discuss processed foods. We're going to compare animal versus plant food sources, and I'll also touch on calorie density, antioxidants, and phytonutrients. I'm going to answer the protein question. A lot of times if you tell people that you're going to eat a whole food plant-based diet or you're going to go vegan or vegetarian, people will ask the question, well, where are you going to get your protein? So I'll answer that question for you. And then I'm going to give you some tips for transitioning. If you listen to this and you're thinking that, oh, I really want to eat this way, or maybe I want to just start to transition and start to eat a little bit more this way, but I'm not ready to go right to the extreme of eating exclusively whole food plant-based. So we'll talk about some tips, and then I will give you some of the sites that you can go to for the research that is existing out there, and some really good resources if you're looking for recipes, articles, some books. There's a lot out there now, so I'll give you some of those resources for your reference. So first we'll talk about the impact of nutrition. We know that lifestyle choices impact our health, but how much? So according to the Cleveland Clinic, about 80% of all chronic diseases are driven by lifestyle factors. So the chronic diseases are the ones that I've already mentioned and many more, but heart disease, diabetes, cancers, etc. And then what are our lifestyle choices or our lifestyle factors? So whether or not we choose to exercise, whether or not we choose to consume alcohol or smoke, whether or not we're managing our stress effectively is a lifestyle factor, how much sleep we're getting. So those are all things that contribute to this 80% of chronic diseases. But last but not least is our nutrition, or what we eat. So why is nutrition so impactful? And to answer that, I want to just mention about the frequency and the mechanics of eating. So when you think about it, from the time that you're born until the time that you die, you're typically eating 2 to 3 times a day, maybe sometimes more, day after day, week after week, month after month, year after year. You're doing this repeated process of taking something that's outside of your body and you're putting it in your mouth and chewing it up and allowing that substance to come into contact with the cells of your esophagus and the inside of your digestive tract, and it gets broken up and distributed out into the insides of your body. And this happens day after day, multiple times over your entire lifespan. So there's quite a repetitive process that goes on there, and that is a big reason why our nutrition is so impactful, is it's coming into contact with the inside of our body, our organs, etc. So let's take a trip back to high school biology class and talk about the cell. So you might remember learning about the different parts of the cell. It has a cell wall, there's a nucleus with the DNA and the RNA, there's the endoplasmic reticulum and the mitochondria. So all of these parts, it's not necessarily super important to remember all of that, but what is important is that your body contains over 35 trillion cells. So that is an enormous number. And cells really are the building blocks for our organs and our organ systems. So I'm going to spend a little time in the next couple slides kind of stressing how cells are the building blocks of our organ systems and body systems. So cells combine to form body tissues, and body tissues combine to form organs, and our organs combine to form organ systems. So I'm going to show you this in a little bit of a different way. In this slide, which I apologize, it's a little bit small to see, but if we look at the left-hand side, we see different types of cells. And so I'm just going to call out some examples here. So the second one from the top is a bone cell. So moving over, you can see that the bone cells combine to form skeletal tissue. And then the skeletal tissue gets together and combines to form an actual bone. So think about your leg bone, your femur, or your arm bone, your humerus. And then all of those bones combine to form the skeletal system. So that's an example of how our cells are building blocks to our body systems. Another example would be, a couple down from the bone cell, is a skeletal muscle cell. So those skeletal muscle cells get together and combine to form skeletal muscle tissue. And then that skeletal muscle tissue gets together and forms an actual muscle. So you might think of your bicep or your tricep or your hamstring, quadricep. So all of those muscles combine to form your muscular system. And then just one more example from this slide. So a couple down from the muscle cell, there is, or actually, I'm sorry, one down is the nerve cell. So the nerve cells combine to form nervous tissue. The nervous tissues combine to form maybe the brain or the spinal cord, or an actual nerve. And then that all combines to form our nervous system. So this is a really nice illustration of how cells are the building blocks to our body systems. And then one more slide to drive this point home. So this is looking or illustrating more at the actual body system. So a couple of them I just mentioned, the skeletal system, the muscular system, and the nervous system. But we also have a bunch of other systems in our body. So the digestive system, the respiratory system, our circulatory system. We also have an integumentary system, which is our skin, and then endocrine and reproductive systems. So we understand this concept that we have trillions of cells in our body and that they are all the building blocks to our body systems. So something that we might not know, and I didn't know this until I started learning about this subject a little bit more, is that the cells that we're born with are not typically the cells that we die with. So depending on the different type of cell, it has a different lifespan. So some examples here in this chart are the stomach lining cells have an average lifespan of 2 days. Red blood cells have a longer lifespan, so 4 months for a lifespan before it gets repaired or replaced. And then one more example here, our bone cells have a little bit of a longer lifespan. So they tend to be more along the 25 to 30 year timeline. So if you combine all the different types of cells in your body and the different lifespans that they average out to getting turned over every 7 years. So I read somewhere that, you know, this is great because every 7 years you actually get a brand new body, which is sort of true, but sort of not. But either way, it's encouraging because I think that a lot of us, maybe we haven't always practiced the greatest lifestyle habits. And what this tells me is that there is always time to change your health, change your cellular health, and therefore change your health on a whole. So it's interesting to understand the different lifespans that we have in the different types of cells, and just the fact that there is this constant repair and replacement process going on with our cells. So healthy cells equal healthy selves. So different things contribute to the health of our cells. But certainly the least of it isn't nutrition. So nutrition is very impactful. It's one of the major things that our body uses to repair and replace our cells. So when we talk about nutrition, we're talking about macronutrients and micronutrients, and that's just a fancy name for the macronutrients. That's our carbohydrates, fats, and proteins. And for the micronutrients, it's our vitamins and minerals. Our hydration is also important in cell health, and some of those other things that I mentioned before, like managing stress and not consuming alcohol or too much alcohol. But as far as nutrition is concerned, we can really take that saying to heart that you are what you eat. So the body is really using the foods that you consume to help to repair and replace your cells. So this picture is showing an unhealthy cell on one side and a healthy cell on the other side. And you can see on the left side, the unhealthy cell, that with if the cell wall isn't super healthy, then maybe only some nutrients are getting into the cell. The body might have a hard time getting some of the waste products out of the cell. And basically, overall, it allows for our different body systems to not be functioning optimally if the cell is kind of sluggish, and maybe I picture it as sort of shriveled up and not functioning at an optimal level. And then on the other hand, on the other side is this picture of a healthy cell that has a healthy cell wall, and all of the structures on the inside are healthy and supported. And when we have this situation, then the exchange of nutrients and materials coming in and out of the cell happens easily, naturally, and without a great deal of effort on the part of our body. Okay, so hopefully that just gave a little bit of foundation for why our nutrition is so important, and it's really to support our cellular health. So now we're going to move on to what actually is a whole food plant-based diet, or what is whole food plant-based nutrition. So I'm going to start with the standard American diet, which is also known as the SAD diet. So on the slide, I have a pie chart that is representing the standard American diet. So this is what we typically consume as Americans. This is from the USDA. So 64% of the foods that we eat, or the calories that we consume, come from processed foods. 23% come from animal foods. And then a smaller percent, about 13%, come from whole plant foods. So you can see there is a much larger percentage for processed foods and animal foods, and just smaller percent for the whole plant foods. So this is something that we come by honestly, that we eat this way as Americans, and we're not the only ones. Other industrialized countries have the same types of percentages. And the reason for that is because our food environment has us surrounded by quick, convenient processed foods that are high in sugars, salts, and fats. And the food industry really knows what it's doing because the sugars, salts, and fats really do have some addictive properties. They cause dopamine release in our brain that kind of makes us, when we eat them, number one, it makes us feel good in the moment, and it also leads us to crave more of the same. So it leads for sets us up for our next cravings of similar items. The food industry also markets these processed foods very heavily. So I think about cereal boxes and how they're marketed to children, and other processed foods, potato chips, cakes, cookies, there's shiny packaging. The food industry does whatever it can to make people think that on the food label that maybe it's a little bit healthier than it is. But in general, in our country, these processed foods are way more available than whole foods, especially, depending on where you live, you may not even have access to whole foods. They also tend to be less expensive, and they also promote or help to support our fast-paced lifestyle in our country. So I know things have slowed down now a little bit with COVID, but in general, people are in a hurry. They're juggling a lot of things, and so it's much easier to grab quick processed foods. But when you look at this slide, what I think of is that none of these foods, quote unquote foods, would grow up out of the earth or out of the soil. So you would never see a donut grow up out of the earth. You would never see a cookie grow up out of the earth, a potato chip. You would see a potato grow out of the earth, but not a potato chip. So processed foods are just that. They've gone through some sort of processing, and the processing usually breaks them down and strips away some of the nutritional value in the food. So processed food is so pervasive in our society, in our culture, that we don't even realize anymore that it isn't real food. And I know that's kind of a bold statement. It's food stuff, but it's like this combination of things that is actually not, as I said before, something that has grown up out of the earth or out of the soil. So whole foods are just the opposite. They are things that grow up out of the earth and out of the soil. So when you look at this slide, you're seeing these fruits and vegetables and grains. So blueberries, broccoli, zucchini, almonds, cherries, limes, ginger, some of the different things that we use for spices, nutmeg, cinnamon. Those are things that come from actual whole foods. One thing I wanted to mention here is that people who eat exclusively this way, so they exclusively eat whole food plant-based, are technically vegan because they don't eat any animal products whatsoever. But the two aren't interchangeable. So being vegan does not necessarily mean that you're eating whole food plant-based. So it's very easy to be a junk food vegan because there are a lot of processed plant foods out there. And there are things like Oreos and French fries that are vegan. So I just wanted to make the distinction that the two are not the same. Okay. So this is a picture of the power plate. This is from the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine. Dr. Neil Bernard heads the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine, which is out of Washington, D.C. It's a whole group of physicians and other clinicians who are dedicated to doing the research and providing resources to the public on how to eat this way. So they give this nice illustration of what it looks like to eat whole food plant-based. And basically, it's showing us that there are 4 main food groups when you eat this way. So it's fruits, grains, legumes, and vegetables. So 4 food groups. And another thing to note here is that you don't see oil anywhere. So for people who exclusively eat whole food plant-based, they don't use oil. And the reason for that is because, well, for one thing, oil, you don't see oil growing up out of the earth. So you might see an olive, or you might see an avocado. And so the rationale behind this is that people would rather eat the avocado or the olive that has fiber in it, it has other nutrients in it, and it's less calorie dense than just squeezing one thing out of a whole food and taking that fat, essentially, that is really high in calorie density and using that. So I just wanted to point that out as well. So let's look at what actually are animal foods versus plant foods. It might seem pretty self-explanatory, but sometimes people get confused with dairy. So animal foods are any meat, so red meat, pork, chicken, turkey, lamb. Also dairy, so any type of animal milk, eggs, yogurt, cottage cheese, regular cheese, and butter are all animal products. Fish and seafood are animals. They have heads and nervous systems. And also animal-based broth, gravy, and liver all fall under the category of animal foods. And then the plants, as I said, are pretty simple: fruits, vegetables, legumes, and whole grains. So I want to point out some of the important differences between animal food sources versus plant food sources. So on the left side, I have animal foods. Those don't have any fiber. They tend to be higher in fats. They do contain cholesterol, which cholesterol is something that we don't need to get from an outside source because our body makes all of the cholesterol that we will ever need by itself. Animal foods tend to be low in antioxidants and phytonutrients, which I'll talk a little bit more about, but they do tend to be complete proteins, and I'll talk about complete and incomplete proteins in a couple of slides. So we'll compare that with plant-based foods. They tend to be great sources of fiber. They're lower in fat. They have minimal cholesterol, and the cholesterol that they do have is plant cholesterol, which is a little bit different than animal cholesterol. They tend to be rich sources of antioxidants and
Jen, I wonder if we lost your connection. We'll give it a second here, folks. Unless other people can hear her and I can't. Can't hear. Okay, thanks, Laura. Thanks for letting me know. All right, let's see here. Just give her a second, see if she comes back. Jen, if you can hear me, you might want to leave and rejoin. All right, thank you, Sylvia. Thank you for letting me know too. And if you're trying, oh, there we go.
Okay. Oh, surprise.
That's okay.
Let me just get back into presentation mode.
Perfect.
Okay, can you see that all right, Katie?
We see your presenter view, so if you just want to go back up to display settings up top and then swap it, we'll be good to go.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. All right.
Okay, so we were just going to talk a little bit more about calorie density, fiber, fats, antioxidants and phytonutrients, and protein as they relate to a whole food plant-based diet. So first, with the calorie density, on the left side of the slide, we see an illustration of 3 different stomachs. And all of the 3 stomachs contain 400 calories of something. So on the very left, we see 400 calories worth of oil. And we see the fact that it's taking up a very small volume in the stomach. And then moving over to the next one, we see 400 calories of chicken. And that takes up a little bit more of the contents of the stomach, but still less than half. And then in the last one, we see 400 calories of vegetables. And now the vegetables are taking up the entire contents of the stomach. So all the same calories, but a different volume. So when you're eating a whole food plant-based diet and you're having more vegetables in your diet, if the contents of your stomach or your stomach is getting filled up with that volume, that will activate stretch receptors. And the stretch receptors will send a message to your brain to tell it that you're starting to get full. And so you can see with foods that are more dense in fat, or some of the proteins here like chicken, they might have the same calories, but they're not activating those stretch receptors as readily, as early. And so the message to the brain doesn't get there until they're eating more of those types of foods. So I always think of a fast food meal when I look at this example, and I think that if you were eating some chicken nuggets and some French fries and drinking some soda, that would be a pretty calorie dense meal, but it wouldn't necessarily fill up your stomach. It wouldn't necessarily activate your stomach stretch receptors. And so you wouldn't get that message to the brain that you're getting full as readily as if you were eating more fruits, vegetables, legumes, and whole grains. And the illustration on the right is showing a similar concept, but just in a different way. So there's a giant cinnamon bun that has 480 calories. And then next to it, there's a plate of fruits and vegetables that also have 480 calories. And what you notice is that there's a whole lot more food in the plate of fruits and vegetables than there is for the cinnamon bun. So it's just a larger volume. And then also you notice the colorfulness of the fruits and vegetables. So those different colors represent different antioxidants and phytonutrients that actually have disease fighting and protective properties in our bodies. So it's very good for us. And there's a lot of fiber and also water in those fruits and vegetables. So again, just more things that help us to feel full. And the fiber has benefits as well that I'll talk about in the next slide. But then we compare that to the same amount of calories in the cinnamon bun, but here we don't see a lot of nutritional value. So there's not a lot of colors or antioxidants or phytonutrients. There is a high amount of sugar and a high amount of fat likely, but that cinnamon bun isn't going to take up a whole lot of space in our stomach, so we're not going to get a big message to the brain that we're getting full. What we will get is a big spike in our blood sugar. And so the way that that works is our blood sugar would go up very rapidly, but then it would also drop very rapidly, and it would drop down actually to a level that was lower than before we even started to eat the cinnamon bun. So when it drops down lower, it sets us up for that next craving for sugar. So we would be looking for that next hit. So you can see the way that calorie density works to our advantage when it comes to a whole food plant-based diet. And then I just have another picture of calorie density here. This is a calorie density chart. And so we're looking at the number of calories in 1 pound of food. So there's a bunch of different food types listed here in this bar chart. And starting on the left-hand side, we see that for 1 pound of vegetables, that is roughly 100 calories. 1 pound of fruit is roughly 300 calories. And so moving our way up, legumes have a little bit higher, so 600 calories per pound of food. And then as we go into refined carbohydrates, which would be like our white bread and our white rice, now we're talking about 1,400 calories for the same pound of food. Junk food, so fast foods, have more like 2,300 calories for a pound of food. And then at the extreme end, we see that the oils and fats have 4,000 calories for a pound of that substance. So this gives a very good visual on why, for people who eat this way, they really can load up their plates. They don't have to be counting calories. They can eat until they're full because they can really trust that that messaging from the stomach to the brain is effective. And basically, it's very difficult to overeat on this way of eating because it's, you know, there's only so much room in your stomach. So calorie density is important. Also fiber, so the whole food plant-based diet gives a lot of fiber. There's 2 different types of fiber, soluble and insoluble. The soluble fiber is just like it sounds, so it will dissolve a little bit in water and it actually forms a gel-like substance and makes it swell up. So this, a good example of this would be if you've ever cooked with chia seeds. When chia seeds get moist, they form that gel-like substance around them. And so the soluble fiber actually has some medicinal properties. Soluble fiber will help to moderate blood sugar levels, and it will also help to lower cholesterol. So a lot of us might be on medications for, you know, moderating our blood sugar and lowering our cholesterol. But if we incorporate soluble fiber into our diet, we may need less of that or maybe be able to do away with it altogether with the advice of our doctor. And then insoluble fiber is the opposite, so it does not dissolve in water. It passes through our system pretty close to its original form, and it really benefits our intestinal health. So most of the insoluble fiber comes from the bran layers of grains. So when we were talking about processed foods and how the processing process often strips away those bran layers of grains. So think of, you know, white bread, that type of thing. The bran layers are stripped away, but those bran layers are actually very beneficial to us and our intestinal health. So another reason why eating the whole grains is beneficial. So talking about fats as it pertains to a whole food plant-based diet, I know this slide is a little bit of a visual assault. There's a lot going on in this slide, but the main point is really that the types of fats that we see the most of in a plant-based diet are the ones that are good for you. So the unsaturated, the polyunsaturated and monounsaturated fats. And the fats that we see more of in animal foods and in processed foods tend to be more of the trans fats, which are actually bad for us. And the saturated fats, which there's some conflicting information on saturated fats these days. They're not all terrible or as bad as trans fats, which are man-made. But the saturated fats and trans fats are those that we are encouraged to either limit when it comes to saturated fats or try to avoid altogether when it comes to trans fats because of the harm that they can do to the inside of your blood vessel walls. So more of a benefit as far as the types of fats when it comes to eating whole food plant-based. And then moving on, just a word on antioxidants and phytonutrients. So plants are rich in both of those. And if you're not familiar with antioxidants, they are naturally occurring chemicals that interact with free radicals. So free radicals are atoms in our systems that have unpaired electrons. And because they have unpaired electrons, you might think back to your chemistry days if you ever took a chemistry class. So because they have unpaired electrons, they can actually cause harm to us at the cellular level. So they can damage our cells, the protein in our cells, and our DNA. And so antioxidants come along to these free radicals and they neutralize them. And so you can picture them like these Pac-Men that kind of go through our system, and when they see those free radicals, they neutralize them and have a bit of a protective function in our bodies. And phytochemicals or phytonutrients are a subgroup of antioxidants, so they're a type of antioxidant. And they actually help the plant to avoid disease. And research is showing that they may have the same type of protective properties in humans as well. So seeing the most of those in plants, on average, plant foods have 64 times the antioxidant power of animal foods, so a whole lot more. So we're encouraged to eat a rainbow. And so you see here on this slide, there's all of the different colors of the rainbow. And then listed next to the colors are the different types of foods that are that color. And then next to that are the different benefits or the different types of antioxidants or the different ways that these help in our body to basically improve things like our cellular health, our immunity, that type of thing. And so, again, I won't read this slide to you, but what it's stressing is that variety is so important in our diet, because when we get a ton of different colors into our plates, that just means that we're getting different disease fighters basically consumed and helping out our cellular health. So eat a rainbow, variety is good. And now the protein question I promised we would answer. So if someone's asking, you know, if you're going to eat this way, where are you going to get your protein? First, there's no question that protein is very important for proper functioning of our body. There are a lot of things that it does for us. It helps us to build and maintain our tissues, so our muscles, our bones, and our brain. Protein helps to transport iron, vitamins, minerals, fats, and oxygen throughout our systems. It helps to maintain the acid-base balance, and it can be used for energy, but it's not the body's preferred energy source. Carbohydrates are the body's preferred energy source. So there are 20 amino acids, and amino acids are basically the building blocks of protein. So there are 20 of them that are important for human nutrition, but 9 of them are essential amino acids. And what that means is 9 of those amino acids our bodies either don't make at all, or it doesn't make enough of. So we need to get those 9 essential amino acids from outside foods. How much protein do we need? So an example here, an average person needs about 0.8 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight. So if you weighed 160 pounds, that would work out to roughly 58 grams of protein per day to meet your daily needs. So looking at this example of some typical foods and how much protein is in them, a cup of beans has 16 grams of protein. 8 ounces of yogurt has 11 grams of protein. A cup of spinach has 5 grams of protein. So if you were to weigh about 160 pounds and need 58 grams of protein, and you ate a cup of beans and a cup of spinach, you would already be getting close to half of your daily protein requirement. So in the media, I feel like we're sort of steered in the direction of always needing more protein and a lot of protein. And I don't think that we actually need as much as we're led to believe. So the big point is that plants have protein, and we don't always think of it that way. I think a lot of times, again, with the media and marketing in our culture, what we think of as protein sources are meat and eggs and those types of things. So on this slide, we're seeing a bunch of examples of plant-based foods and how much protein is in them. So I'll just call out a couple of the foods and their amounts. Soybeans have, in a cup of soybeans, there are 21 grams of protein. A cup of lentils has 18 grams of protein. Any type of bean is a good source of protein. So black beans, kidney beans, baked beans all have around 12 to 15 grams of protein. Tofu is a good one, veggie burgers. Quinoa is actually a complete protein, and peanut butter and any of the nut butters also have protein. But you have to remember that if you're focused on weight loss, you have to be careful about things like nut butters, avocados. It's not to say that you can't eat those, you can, but you just have to be careful that you're not eating too many of them because they tend to be higher on that calorie density chart. So it used to be thought that foods that had all 9 of those essential amino acids in the same spot were superior to foods that maybe had 4 or 5 of them. And what the research is showing us is that that's not true. And we can actually combine 2 or 3 foods that have all 9 of those essential amino acids when you stack them up, and your body will benefit the same to it as if you were eating a food that just had all 9 of those essential amino acids in one place. So if you were having hummus with a pita, beans and rice, peanut butter on whole wheat bread, those are examples of complementary proteins. So you're taking 2 different food sources. One might have 4 of those essential amino acids and the other might have 5, but combined they have all 9, and that is essentially just as good as eating something like an animal product, say steak or a hamburger, that has all 9 of those essential amino acids in one place. So some tips for transitioning if you're thinking, oh, maybe I would like to eat a little bit more this way. My number 1 tip is to keep it simple, start small and attainable. So you can't just, well, I don't want to say can't, but it's a challenge to totally revamp the way that you're eating overnight. So you want to start with maybe 1 meal, maybe look at your breakfast or your lunch and say, all right, I'm going to try to find a couple of breakfast or lunch options that appeal to me, that would really taste good, that aren't hard to prepare. And I'm going to get used to doing that, eating that, and then maybe I'll move on to another meal, or I'll think of some snacks that I really like that I want to keep on hand. So keep it small if you're thinking about changing to this way of eating, and then build off of it. You definitely need to plan if you're going to transition to a whole food plant-based diet. So when are you going to write your grocery list? When are you going to actually do your grocery shopping? What day of the week will you do it? So planning is half the battle when it comes to this, and basically making sure that you have the things in your house that you need on hand so that you make it easy for yourself to follow this way of eating. Batch cooking is a great thing to do. So maybe on the weekend, a weekend day, if you have more time, then you could do a big batch of something like whole food plant-based soup or chili or rice and beans. Make a big batch so that you can use that throughout the week and you're not feeling like you have to cook every single day of your life. Planning for the unexpected is important, so keeping some healthy snacks on hand, maybe in your purse, in your glove box, in your car. If you go to the office these days, in your desk drawer, making sure that you have a healthy option handy, because we all know that life doesn't always go as planned, and you want to be prepared so that you don't get yourself set up for, going to the extreme of, driving through McDonald's because you're ravenous. So keep some healthy snacks with you at all times. Definitely make it appealing. Maybe buy some plant-based cookbooks. Get some of your family involved with you to do some home cooking if you have people that you live with. Watch some documentaries, whatever is appealing to you that will make it exciting. And definitely talk to your doctor if you're going to make some of these changes. And definitely important to supplement with vitamin B12 if you're going to eat exclusively whole food plant-based. So those are good things to keep in mind. I've got a couple of slides here that just have pictures on them. I want people to see what this looks like. So what a typical breakfast, a typical lunch, a typical dinner. So on this breakfast slide, I've got two examples. One is toast on the left-hand side. So you see a couple of different types of, that's whole grain bread. And then on the top one, you can see they've sliced up some bananas. There's some chia seeds on there and a couple of mini chocolate chips. There might be some nut butter underneath the banana, I'm not sure. On the second one, you can see that it looks like some avocado toast. So there's avocado and tomato, and it looks like some basil or spinach, salt and pepper, a little hot sauce. That looks really good to me. And then below it, there's another piece of whole grain bread with what looks like some peanut butter, some sort of nut butter, sliced apples, and some sprinkled cinnamon. So pretty easy, pretty appealing breakfast foods. On the other side is a bowl of whole oats. They might be overnight oats. So you would pour some almond milk or different type of plant milk into your oats the night before or even a few hours before. Put it in the refrigerator. And then when you pull it out, just put some fruit on there. This picture has bananas and blueberries. It looks like there might be some other, looks like peanuts, but cinnamon. So just again with the variety. So a variety of things is good here, but oats are very simple, very healthful breakfast. So some good breakfast ideas. For lunch, on the left, there's a big salad bowl that has lots of colorful veggies, and I guess they're all veggies. So different colored tomatoes, broccoli, I see some zucchini that's spiralized, avocado, beets, corn. And again, you can see there's a huge quantity of food here. You don't have to be shy about quantity when you eat this way, and very colorful, very nutrient dense. And then on the right, it looks like a hummus wrap with, again, lots of colorful vegetables, greens. It looks like hummus. So some tasty lunch options. And then finally dinner, we see a veggie pizza on the left with, we could assume, a whole grain crust, and then rice and beans on the right. Probably brown rice is the best option. You have to be a little bit careful with white rice, but some healthy dinner options there. So finally, I want to make sure that people see where you can go if you want more information or you want to know the resources that I've kind of used for this talk. So at the top is the International Journal for Disease Reversal and Prevention website. That's where a lot of the research that has been done on this is kept. There are many leaders in this field, very well-known docs, Colin Campbell, Dr. Caldwell Esselstyn, Dean Ornish, Neil Bernard, and Michael Greger are just a few. I've put their websites here, and all of them, their websites have a bevy of information if you're interested in learning more, or you're looking for recipes, or you want to see success stories. There's tons of them out there. And then underneath that are just some documentaries, books, that you can take a look at the title, see if it's something that interests you. I didn't have time today to talk about athletes on a plant-based diet, but there are a lot of athletes out there who are seeing a great benefit in their sports performance when they've transitioned to eating this way. So hopefully you find that helpful. And I know I rushed a little bit at the end, but I'm aware of the time. And I wanted to make sure I left a few minutes here for questions. So happy to answer or try to answer.
Oh, thanks, Jen. Thanks for that really wonderful presentation. And we do have quite a few questions. Okay, so the first one I'm seeing is back when you were talking about vegans. So it's if oil is not consumed, what is used to cook with?
That's a great question. So a lot of times people will just use water, like to saute, like a lot of, soup recipes and that will ask you to saute like onions, garlic in the beginning or some vegetables. People will use water and you would be surprised. It doesn't sound like it would work very well or taste very well, but it actually works. And I don't miss the taste of the oil personally. I don't know if that's the case for everyone. But water is an option, and then the other good option is vegetable broth. So that's a great thing that has some flavor in it that you could, use as a substitute.
Okay, thank you. This next one is, what is a good alternative for the ubiquitous rice? As a type 1 diabetic, rice has a very high glycemic index and is problematic.
Yeah, great question. So I think that quinoa is a good alternative to rice. And I would say if you're trying to lower the glycemic index, maybe you would combine the quinoa with some sort of vegetable that was low on the glycemic range. So maybe, chopping up and sauteing some onion and mixing that in with your quinoa to give it a little bit more bulk, or some peas or edamame. So that would be an idea.
All right, thanks, Jen. The next one is, when preparing these plant-based foods, is it best to serve them raw, natural form, or to cook them? Can we consume them cooked and still get the benefit?
Yeah, yep. So I know there's a lot out there on the raw food diet. And, I think the rationale behind that is that the enzymes aren't all broken down when we don't cook our food. So once we start the cooking process, then that begins to break down some of the enzymes that are beneficial to our health. So yeah, you can certainly still get benefits from cooked food. Raw food is good too, but I think that this is something where you definitely don't have to eat a totally raw food diet to get the health benefits from vegetables and other foods. If you can not cook things to the extreme, so an example I'm thinking of is like broccoli. So if you try to just cook your broccoli a little bit rather than really cooking it to the point where it's mushy in that, the difference there will preserve some of the nutritional value of the broccoli if you don't overdo it. So basically find a happy medium there. And also, not everyone can tolerate raw foods or a lot of raw foods in their diet. So it has to be individualized.
Thanks, Jen. This next one is a little background and then a question. So it says, began veganism because of atrocities of factory farming and how animal-based diets are destroying the oceans and earth. Health was the secondary benefit for me, but having trouble without being able to eat soy products.
Okay, yeah. There are a lot of other options. I know it's tough without soy, but certainly, I think of soy milk and the fact that there are so many different types of plant-based milks out there now, almond milk, rice milk. There's a lot of those. And then, thinking of like tempeh and seitan, which are soy-based plant products. But alternatives to that would be, making, say, veggie burgers out of beans or chickpeas and that type of thing. But yeah, challenge to have to leave soy out of the picture.
Okay, thank you. Just two more things here. I know we're coming up on time, but This one is, please talk about Diet Pepsi or diet soda and beverages in general. I drink water most of the day, but Diet Pepsi is my morning caffeine.
Okay. Yeah, so I think that definitely water is the best. Diet sodas do have the artificial sweeteners, and so that can play a little bit with our dopamine responses in our brain and the way that our gut responds as far as maybe making us a little bit hungry. I think that to get to the basics of it, you have to be able to do what seems doable for you. So if you're like, I want to have this one can of Diet Coke or Diet Pepsi in the morning, but I'm going to drink water the rest of the day, and I'm going to, try to eat more whole food, plant-based way. And, basically it's like, what can you live with? Ideally, would you drop the diet sodas out of your diet? I would say yes, but are you going to be able to do that without, stress and maybe leading you to, eat something else that's less healthy? So the diet sodas are definitely not health food. I would maybe think about, if you can't give it up entirely, maybe finding something else like a tea that has caffeine in it. Matcha tea is something that I know a lot of people have that I believe does have some caffeine, and it's got a lot of health benefits. So maybe you say to yourself, like, I can't just quit this cold turkey, but I'm going to drink half my can of diet soda, and I'm going to also make myself a nice cup of this matcha tea or some other tea with caffeine in it, and see if I can wean myself off of the soda. That might be a good idea. But I would definitely say keep pushing your water. That's great that you're drinking water. That's always beneficial to us. So the more water, the better.
Thanks for that, Jen. And then this last thing is just a comment. It says the calorie density chart is very eye-opening.
Yes, absolutely. And I have to say, there are a lot of people out there who, once they realize that, and they realize if you really like to eat, which, a lot of us do, it's nice to know that you can eat a volume of food that is good for you and actually either maintain your weight easily or lose weight if that's your goal. So yeah, the calorie density can work to your advantage.
Definitely. Well, now I'm just saying thank yous. Thanks for a great presentation. Thank you so much. This was awesome. So Jen, thank you very much.
Oh, you're so welcome. It was a pleasure to be here.
All right. Bye, everyone. This is, can you email your slide presentation? There's a lot of info.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay.
I can send it to you, Katie.
Perfect. All right. Well, everybody enjoy the rest of your day. And Jen, I'll connect with you offline.
All right. Sounds great. Thank you.